Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Hey friends, you got MJ from the Coaches Panel. Hope you're doing well, and we are starting to make some really good headway into this year's 50 most relevant, where I count you down who I believe are the most relevant fantasy footballers across all of the formats. Look, it pains my heart to have this guy so low in the 50 most relevant. I think I had him pretty close to the top 10 last year, but at number 46, Josh Kelly is who we are talking about. He had a quiet start. We'll get to that. But then he delivered his usual high output for the better part of 3/4 of 2021. We got him on the episode yesterday. Thought we'd sneak him back for another. Fellow co-founder of the Coaches Panel, Rids, is back. Hello, mate. How are you?
Hey, how you going, mate? And your boy?
He's one of my boys, and he has been for a long time. And I know you've been a big advocate for Josh Kelly pretty much since his real breakout year of 2017, if not before. I know you've been a big fan of Josh, and so excited to talk about him with you on this episode. Still just the 26 years of age. It feels like he's been playing a lot longer than that, but the GWS Giants midfielder has been an incredible fantasy stalwart for coaches for the better part of the past 5 to 6 seasons. His top score last year in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, well, that was a 152 against the eventual Wooden Spooners in North Melbourne, while his top score was a 148 in Supercoach against the Tigers. Neither of those are career high scores, though. You got to go back to 2018 across the formats to get that. It was a 166 against the Gold Coast Suns in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team. And he is a part of the 200 club in Supercoach. It was a 205 against the Blues, and it was a sensational game. He's priced relatively cheaply, given what we know he can do. It's a 103.7 in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, and a 106.9 in Supercoach as his average points. And he's priced just over 580,000 in Supercoach, 922,000 in AFL Fantasy, and just shy of 885,000 in Dream Team. And look, if you are a long-time Coaches Panel man or girl, you would definitely know of my love of Josh Kelly. He is one of my boys. And despite the rocky start last year, like a true romantic comedy, I suppose, Rids, and I'm sure your partner makes you watch them too, is it all lived happily ever in the after when it came to Josh Kelly last year?
Well, surprisingly, he was actually in the top 20 across the board in the mids, and that was in Supercoach and the whole lot from average. So he's priced around the 20th, like in both all the formats. That's staggering considering how poor he was in that first, I don't know, what do you reckon, half a dozen?
Is the first 6 weeks, he actually in AFL Fantasy and coaches that play that format will be very familiar. He gained forward eligibility and became a mid forward in that format because Champion Data said he was actually a mid forward and spending so much time through that forward rotation. And so for those first 6 weeks, he was a shadow of himself in contrast to what he did for the rest of the year, let alone the rest of his entire AFL career.
Okay, so let's talk why he was playing that role.
Why was he playing that high half forward role, Rids?
Lockie Whitfield.
100%.
It's direct correlation. Lockie Whitfield. Lockie Whitfield fits, and in that team means Josh Kelly plays midfield.
Yep.
When Lockie Whitfield is not fit and in that team, that means Josh Kelly, who's the most suited replacement to play the Lockie Whitfield role.
Yep.
Whether it's forward, whether it's back, however it is out on the wing, that's directly what it is. I couldn't be any more blunt about it.
No.
So when you're going to go for Josh Kelly, you have to have a direct eye line on Lockie Whitfield. Is he in the team? Is he fit? Has he had a good preseason? Because that's when you will go and you'll get the best Josh Kelly.
Yeah, that is 100% right. What he did average in the first 6 weeks without Lockie Whitfield was an 85 in AFL fantasy and a 90 in Supercoach. He didn't register a score over 100 in AFL fantasy and Dream Team, and his top score in Supercoach was 100, his only ton. However, Whitfield comes back into that side in round 7 against the Adelaide Crows. And what happens from that point onwards? Well, in AFL fantasy and Dream Team, he averaged 111, scoring 12 tons, 3 over 120. So maybe not the ceiling that we'd hoped as much from him, but when he hits a ceiling game, he's got a ceiling game. It was a 152 and a 141 from these final 15 games and just the one score below 96. Similarly in Supercoach, from round 7 onwards, Whitfield's back in that side, 12 tons, 6 over 120, and he averaged 113 and included a run of 10 consecutive tons from round 7 to 17. The last 15 games of this year is really reflective of what he's done ever since 2017. Because for the past 5 years, this is what he's averaged across the formats. In AFL fantasy, 113, 108, 116, an adjusted average of 106, and then last year's 104. Scoring line's even better in Supercoach. 113, 113, 117, 114, and now the more recent 107. We've got a guy, Rids, and we'll talk about some of the previous question marks and potential future ones in a moment. But we're talking about a player who's priced at about 105 across the formats, a little bit less in AFL fantasy, a little bit more in Supercoach, who's got proven potential of 10 points per game of value and is one of the most reliable and consistent performers when he's out on the field.
Now, I remember talking to you about this last year. And it's probably the last 2 or 3 years. If you like Josh Kelly and you're going to pick Josh Kelly, you pick him from round 1.
100%.
Okay. He's got a little bit of value in his price point anyway with his starting price compared to what he could average. Now, on top of that, his durability. That's one of the major concerns with Josh Kelly over the last 4 or 5 years.
Correct.
Is his durability. But, I mean, if you're upgrading to him, that's only going to increase the risk of that coming into play.
Yeah.
He is absolutely priced to start, and you're starting from round 1, and you kill that risk of the durability moving forward. So,
arguably, you could even build a case too, Rids, that maybe that injury-prone concern, well, sure, from a legacy perspective, is there. He only missed the one game last year because of a 5-day turnaround of the Giants, and he hurt his ankle in late in that game. There were a bunch of different games where you know owners were like, "Oh, this is the game." They see the head knock, they see him go off limping. It's like, "Oh, this is the game. Here comes the trade." But he just found a way to push through. He was fit. He was dominating through all preseason last year. And had it not been for a COVID-affected round adjustment, where it's like, "Oh man, we've got to turn these games around fast." The club itself even said, had it been a 6-day or a 7-day break, Josh would have played. So is that durability concern as the reason for not starting him? Because I agree with your point of if you like him, start him because there's value and you eliminate that legacy risk. But if the only reason you've been anti-Josh Kelly is because of the durability risk, can you use that as an argument anymore?
Well, you can, but I don't think you can. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's got less water in
his prime. Yeah, he's 27 in February. He's absolutely coming into his prime. He's probably had multiple full pre-seasons behind him if he gets through this pre-season. If Lockie Whitfield starts this year, he's got no other reason why he wouldn't be playing midfield. And I think with that last year or so, there's real data now showing that maybe he's got his body to a point where he's figured it out. It's trustworthy, you know. So, yeah, and I think I'm not the only one. I 100% think you will be too. This guy's got 120 season across any format.
It feels like a matter of time, doesn't it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it does. And he's building. But, I mean, the thing that really strikes with me is his starting price is at 10, 15 points lower than what it could be or should be. I mean, I spoke yesterday in that pod that we
on
did
LED,
around on lead and saying, well, you don't want to grab these guys at high prices because magic number is at its highest point. Like this guy is 100%. He could easily average 115 over multiple weeks,
No question.
starting from round one, and his price wouldn't drop. Like, so I mean, I don't see him as an upgrade option. I just absolutely 100% think if you like him, you start with him. That's pretty simple.
I think it's really good. Look, the first 5 to 6 rounds from a draw perspective, this is who the GWS Giants come up against. They have a battle of the bridge against the Swans to kick off round 1. Round 2, they come up against Richmond. Round 3, they come up against the Gold Coast Suns. Round 4, they come up against the Fremantle Dockers. Heading into round 5, they come up against the Premiers in Melbourne. And then round 6, again, we could go further, but we'll just look at that first 6 rounds. They come up against St Kilda. So none of those are crazy challenges. And for me, I'm with you, Rids. I look at what he's done over the majority of the past 5 years, and I go, I've got a guy who feels like one of the safest 110 guys. He does all the offensive stuff, and then he actually does the defensive side of things too. And people don't rate him for that. He ranked 10th in the AFL last year for total tackles. 10th. So he's winning contested ball. He's winning uncontested ball. He was 20th in the league last year for meters gained, top 15 for inside 50s. And he's doing the hard defensive stuff. There's this misnomer about Kelly that, he's just a one-way midfielder. Absolutely not. He is one of the most complete midfielders in the game. He uses it well, which is really critical for super coaches, but also for dream team and fantasy players. What makes it so good is where they've got the Bulls of Taranto, Hopper, Green, if he can find his way in there amongst others, let alone if a Cornelio is fit. They want Kelly bringing the ball inside forward 50 along with a Lockie Whitfield. He wins the offensive ball in a contested and in open situations. He does the defensive stuff. He offers value in your starting price point. He's got 5 years of data to prove he's around the 110 to 115 marker across all the formats. He's unique. And for me, I just look at all those things and go, if you want a potential captain option most weeks, if you want, even though he didn't have a great ceiling last year in contrast to others, in terms of frequent 120s, if you want a guy that's really near impossible to tag and is unique, then Kelly feels like he fits the bill. I know some would look at the GWS role roundabout last year, and maybe that's some concern given his ability to be the beast is linked to Whitfield, because they did make a lot of changes last year. Taranto spent time forward. Cornelio spent time forward. Ash, who's a running defender, spent time as a defensive midfielder. Perryman played under every single crevice of the ground. They even played their intercepting defender, Nick Haynes, up on the wing early last year. So I get that there's some role concern, but to your point, Rids, that you made, if Kelly's fit, he's a beast. And if Whitfield is fit and firing too, then any sense of concern you have about Josh Kelly needs to go out the window.
And I think you struck something just a minute ago. The fact is, his ceiling wasn't totally on point last year at all. He had 2 decent games. But, I mean, he averaged 107, and he had the first 6 games where he was down. He averaged 107 in Supercoach and 103, 104 in Dream Team and AFL Fantasy. What can this guy actually average if he is going to have one of those seasons? Like, if he goes and averages 30 possessions a game and kicks the odd goal here and there, I mean, you said it a minute ago, his work rate's massive. He was tackling, he's doing everything that fantasy coaches want their players to do. I mean, he can play that outside chip and mark type of game. He can go in and win hard contested balls. He starts in at the centre square. He pushes out to a wing. He goes forward and he kicks goals. I mean, I just don't see. I mean, you know I'm a fan.
Yes, we both are, yes.
Yeah, but I just don't see why this guy isn't absolutely a discussion point to start with moving forward.
If you want
at any point in time,
Yeah.
If he averages 120 over 6 games of rounds of football, I mean, I don't think that's a surprise to anyone, is it?
I don't think it. Let's go back to 2019. I want to remove 2020 because there's so many variables in that year. AFL Fantasy and Dream Team coaches, you might be playing the adjusted averages, and that's not fair to do that in Supercoach. The impact you had on a game was more condensed. So some of the scoring is a little more more fluid than maybe it would have been in certain games. Go back to the first 11 games of his 2019 season to see what he can be. Here's his AFL Fantasy and Dream Team scores. There's some ceiling in here, ladies and gentlemen. 100, 114, 106, 113, 115, 120, 135, 140, 128, 148, and 120. Yeah, they're not bad. Let's look at Supercoach. 95, 114, 97, 116, 154, 131, 148, 138, 107, 128, 104. What are we doing? We've got a guy who's at 105 range, who is a legacy 115 player. The injury concerns are now gone. And nobody owns him. Nobody talks about him. Yeah, there's some good midfielder options around and cheaper and above. Absolutely there are. But for me, I keep finding myself looking back at Josh Kelly going, I can't pick Mills over him. I can't pick Laird over him. And then even some of the other big boys, I go, man, he could match or better a Walsh. He could match or better a Clayton Oliver. He could match or better a Zach Merritt. Maybe at the value, I take the Josh Kelly.
Yeah, but I mean, when I think of Josh Kelly, I think of Jackson McRae, I think of Sam Walsh, I think of Touk Miller, those gut running types.
Yeah.
He absolutely is in that category. So, I mean, if those guys can average, 120 a season, then I don't think he's out of the ballpark. Now, if you're looking for injuries, the reason why these guys are cheaper or their starting price is a little bit lower than the other guys is because they have had injuries. That's just the reality of it. So Lachie Whitfield. Now, let's do the flip one now. Let's have an argument now.
Okay.
How many GWS guys is too many? We're looking at Whitfield. We're looking at Taranto. We're looking at Canelio.
Yep.
We're looking at Bruce.
Yep.
How many can we squeeze in here, MJ?
I think that's the hard part. Is there's only so much ball to go around, isn't there?
Well, yeah. So does that mean Canelio in this instance, is a must-have in Dream Team, not so much AFL Fantasy because he's probably a little bit pricier.
Yep.
But is he more of a must-have in Dream Team? So does that mean Taranto, though, with Green out early, is he an upgrade option?
Yeah.
Is he a starter option? Is Whitfield, his durability is just as much questionable, if not more, than what Kelly's is?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, Bruce, have we even seen this guy play more than 2 games of football in a season?
No, not at the elite level, no.
At his price tag, yeah, by all means, jump on. But the fact is, I actually think there's more questions around guys in his same team that instead of Kelly. I think Kelly actually 100% should be in that discussion as one of the first picks from the Giants. Yeah. So anyways, I just wanted to throw it out there because I know that's where people are going to get hung up. How many Giants? How many this? How many that?
Yep.
Injuries, durabilities, burn. They've got never again lists, don't they? People out there.
They do, yes.
I'm sure Kelly features very high on a few of those never again lists.
Absolutely.
But the reality, I reckon Jack Zeeble features on them. I reckon Aaron Hall featured on them. There was quite a few guys from 2021 who were featuring on never again lists that, burnt you if you didn't start them.
Yep. No, I think that's true. Look, Kelly is a phenomenal footballer. Will people start him? Based on his ownership percentages at the moment, AFL Fantasy is the only format that's open to the public at the moment. The other formats, if you've paid for assistant coach or whatever the name is, or gold subscribers or anything like that, those ownership percentages aren't as publicly known. But if we look at Josh Kelly and what his current ownership percentage is in AFL Fantasy, it's just a guide. It's 3.3%. The question mark that people will always ponder, that maybe for another episode we'll get to, is at what point does a player's ownership percentage mean you have to change your strategy or change the player you pick, either to go against or to go after and go and get? That is going to be an interesting one. For me, Kelly's right in the wheel bag of starting across the formats. Now, he's fighting with a couple, but gosh, he's right in consideration for me. What about for you, Reds?
Yeah, he has to be, mate, because at the end of the day, you always start guys that represent value.
Yes.
You have to. Okay. So whether you go to a Matt Crouch type, or whether you go to, like, if you go to the forwards and you look at Josh Dunkley, or if you look at Mitch Duncan, or, you're always looking for value. Okay.
Yes.
Lockie Whitfield in the backs, Jake Lloyd in the backs, whoever it is, you're always looking for value. Now, the problem that you got is you've got two absolute guns in the midfield that are going to be absolutely max priced. Okay.
Yep.
So, but even Brodie Grundy in the rucks, value. You're looking at Bruce, value. Yep. O'Brien, value. So, Josh Kelly is value. I don't know how else to say this.
Yep.
Like, if you're not looking at Josh Kelly, you're playing the game wrong.
Yep.
Like, if he's not in that conversation, you know what he's done. You know he's got history. And again, people might come to me and say, yeah, he's got history of injury too. Yeah, that's great. No dramas.
That's why you start.
But the thing is, we've got to take it on face value. That's why he is cheap. Like, he is a gun. There's no problems about that, yeah? Like, this guy could go 115 to 120 at any stage. Like, in any season, across any format, that's what he's going to do. If
100%.
the Giants improve, and I think they will, I think they'll play good football, and I think they'll actually compete again. He has to be in the best 2 or 3 options going across in the midfield again. Like, you can't have a guy that's averaged, like, priced at 105. That's got the capability and possibility of going 120.
Yep.
Like, you just have to go with those guys. And I just want to throw one thing out there. If people are worried about this guy's durability and his injury history, are you starting Josh Dunkley?
Are you starting Aaron Hall, Lockie Whitfield?
Well, are we picking and choosing when to use these excuses? And these, like, you can't pick and choose. If you're going to have it, you have it for everyone.
One for
I don't want to see a Bruce in your team. I don't want to see a Dunkley. I don't want to hear the arguments. Zach Butters, another one. Like, I mean, these guys all have injuries. Like, it's part of the game.
100%.
Just move on.
Start with them, minimize the risk, bank the games, and then if you have to trade them, sure. I'm with you.
Jay, that's part of the game. If you get an injury in the game, you trade them.
But we're going to get so many injuries this year, or COVID impacts, where things like again, we'll get to that podcast, later down the track. But it's going to be a really challenging year to navigate. And so for me,
and that's why guys like Laird and Mills and everyone else are going to be so important, because they don't miss games of football outside of, like, these are the types that you're going to have to maximize. And if you get a good 5 weeks out of these guys, and if they get injured, guess what? You've already jumped in the rankings.
Banker points.
Make the trade and move on.
Yeah. No, I think it's some good advice.
That's just the way it needs to happen.
Yeah, some good advice, man. All right, before we wrap up this episode, we always love to talk about drafts. And on draft day, gosh, a coach could get some serious early draft value with Josh Kelly. As we've discussed throughout this article, the reality is, and throughout the podcast as well, you can check the article out at coachespanel.tv. He's a legacy 110, 115 player, no question marks. someone's going to get him as an M2, possibly even an M3, depending on they draft. Maybe if they draft heavy on alternate positions, they go as him as an M1. I don't see him going inside the first 20 picks or the first 2 rounds, Rids. But in that 3rd round, maybe even 4th, depending on how people go heavy in the other positions. Man, if he's there in the 4th round of a draft, I won't be able to hit that draft now button quick enough because he's got the potential, and I mean this in all seriousness, to be a top 3 or 4 performing midfielder for the year. And you'll get him in the 3rd or 4th rounds of a draft.
So I said yesterday in one of the pods that I
the
did.
Laird you said Laird, was you'd be happy to pick in the 2nd, I think it was, or mid, somewhere.
I'd be happy to pick in the 2nd, only because of his consistency and his durability. That's where I hold high values in draft leagues.
Yes.
Kelly, I'm sort of thinking I would be the same to jump in at round 2, only because I know his potential. Okay. Yes. We're talking about getting a top 5 mid for the season.
Potentially, yeah.
Late. I don't think he goes again until round 3, round 4. And I think if you get him at round 3, round 4, you jump on board.
And again, it's something we talk about when we talk about drafting all the time, is you protect your pick with your next pick. And so if depending on who you've selected, you've gone heavy mids and a couple of them have some concerns with durability, then draft an extra mid in a few rounds earlier than you normally would. Each pick protects and supports the other pick. So I'm with you. I'm probably not, I won't have to worry about him in the first 2 rounds. I don't see anyone jumping at that point. But round 3, I will happily click draft now. And if by some sheer bit of luck he's in the 4th, you feel like you've won draft day with Josh Kelly at that point. He is an absolute sensational pick. Hey, Rids, appreciate you jumping on board for this episode again, my friend.
And you know what, mate? One of these years, we're going to be right about Josh Kelly, and he's going to average 120.
Mate, a broken clock is right twice a day. So if we keep saying it, eventually he'll average 120.
You're right.
All right. Well, if you want to go and check out the article on him or any of the other players revealed so far in the 50 most relevant, all the links are at coachespanel.tv. It's also where you can become a Patreon supporter. If you're loving the podcasts and the articles you're getting from us so far this year or over the past couple of years, we'd appreciate your support. It helps us all do exactly what we do, which is bring you some of the best fantasy footy content going around. You can join all the Patreon links and tiers at coachespanel.tv. I hope you're enjoying these podcasts. These are one of the early rewards that our Patreons get. All the links for that, like I said, at coachespanel.tv. Well, we're 5 players in so far in the 50 most relevant. O'Brien, Mills, Millerer, Laird, and Kelly. There's a couple of big potential premium midfielders in that group. There's a potential top 2 ruck in that group, and maybe one of the best value defenders rolling around. But are there better value defenders than Wayne Millerer? Well, tomorrow, that's the line we head. Value defenders. But he might not just be a value defender. He might be good enough to be a premium hold for the year. Who is this guy at number 45? We'll tell you tomorrow on the 50 most relevant.